The debate surrounding the future of David Moyes is something that's going to happen this summer. With West Ham winning the trophy or not, whatever happens, it's still going to be a debate. It's been a tough season. It's a strange one because you look at David Moyes' record. We're going to talk about it in a minute, but it's been a bit of a change recently. The last few days of what's going on with David Moyes, we've had it quite clearly stated from the club quite much throughout that he has a full backing of the club. We're loyal to our managers. We're not looking to change everything. He's had it all season, isn't he? Really, Riley. I mean, they could have sacked Moyes ages ago. Before the World Cup, there was a lot of pressure on the club to do so. They haven't done it. They've stuck by him and they've said, no. We're loyal to this man. We believe in David Moyes, blah, 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 blah. And David Moyes himself has come out recently and said that he's happy. He was linked to the Celtic manager job. And he was asked in a press conference what he thought about it and completely dismissed it. Totally didn't even kind of flirt with the idea, didn't sort of leave half a door open. Completely said, no, not interested. I'm very happy at West Ham, very settled in London, got plans for next season. It was all basically, I'm staying here, there's no plan. And I actually, to be honest with you, even though I've got my thoughts on David Moyes, I quite liked it because it made me feel a bit settled. It's almost like it puts it to bed, nips it in the bud. Right, and it almost made me go, okay, we've got David Moyes next season. That's what's going to happen here. And my gut feeling is if we win the tournament, he'll get offered another contract. However, there's been a big change, Riley, mate. It's been a big change. There's a lot of leaks coming out of this football club, and it's got to be coming from the club because they're going to certain journalists that know the club quite well, basically suggesting that David Sullivan actually doesn't want to keep David Moyes on, that he's lost a bit of patience over the season and could well look to change. Whether we win or well, basically, he suggests, I think it is, if we don't win the trophy, he will lose his job, which I actually think is quite harsh. I think it's a bit harsh on a manager to do that, especially a club like West Ham. What's your thoughts, Riley, on this? Where do you think this all sits? Do you think David Moyes is going to be here next season, or if we win the trophy, or do you think if we lose, or where do you think?
I think he probably will. I mean, going off the basis that I think we'll probably win the Conference League anyway, I will imagine he will stay on. I mean, this whole season has been a bit of a rebuild period. You know, it's been a period of bedding in players and settling in players and allowing the copious amounts of transfers we had to make in the summer settle into a new team. Obviously, while that was happening, David Moyes threw everything in it, the kitchen sink, trying to come together with a new way of making these players work. Three at the back, playing 4-4-2 at times. So all sorts of different ways of trying to play to integrate the players. And what we just needed to do was just let them bed in and just stick to the old system and try and get them better adapt to the system in terms of just getting a formation that is going to help the formation adapt to the players, because that doesn't work, does it?
No.
I think if we just write off this season, David Moyes has filled his remit. He's kept us up. If he wins the Conference League, it will have got us European football another year in a row, 3 years in a row. That for us, you would have said, what? He's won a trophy. We've got European football three times in a row. I think he's bought quite well. I think people criticise his buyings, but I actually think he's bought quite well. The only issue is he's never seemed to found his striker at all. So hopefully in the summer, maybe he can get something going, or hopefully keep Scamacca. I think there is definitely some scope for him to stay on next season, and I just wonder how far he can take the club. To get a sixth place finish next season would be insane with the amount of competition you've got. Now that you've got sides like Brentford and Newcastle, Tottenham didn't even get European football last season, and Chelsea were nowhere near it. Brentford as well. There's so many, getting European football would be so difficult next season. So I think if you ask West Ham fans, can David Moyes get us fighting between 10th and 6th next season, which I think is probably a realistic aim for us.
Yeah,
I would argue he could do it. He's clearly got the respect of the players. I think he will invest the rice money well.
Right, okay.
He's got us with a decent style of playing. However, there are plenty of managers out there who I'd be more than willing to give the reins to, one of which being Graham Potter. I'm still a big fan of Graham Potter. I'd still like to maybe see if he would take over and get some stuff going. Brendan Rodgers for me is more, I don't know, he seems like a David Moyes 2.0, someone who's a little bit past it. But, what he's done at Leicester in the last few years. It's quite remarkable. And I think he does buy quite well. You know, Leicester have always traditionally been a team that can sell players and replace them quite well. But I'm honestly not sure, mate, to be honest with you. I feel like getting rid of David Moyes is risky, but it just depends who maybe we could get in instead.
Yeah, I'm exactly that same feeling. I actually do feel for David Moyes, and I know we you know, at the end of the day, we talk on this channel a lot. I've been very critical of him personally. I think you have as well at times. I mean, you know, because at the end of the day, I think what the frustration with West Ham fans is that the style of football simply has just become quite frustrating to watch. It's been, you know, we go into games against lesser oppositions and pretty much just sitting there defending all the time. And I think fans just get a bit tired of watching that. They want to see their players express themselves, and you know, especially the quality we've got in our squad, you do find yourself feel like they've got the shackles on, they can't play. But then at the same time, when you look at David Moyes' record at West Ham, you know, saved us some relegation. Took over Pellegrini, saved us some relegation comfortably. He's not just, you know, in a last day scenario. He got us out of it quite well. Finished 6th the season after, got us in the Europa League. The second season, he finished 7th and got to the semi-final of the Europa League. The next season, all right, we finished 14th. Wasn't great, but got to the final of the Conference League and possibly can lift the trophy. That's pretty remarkable. Like, if you look at that record, I mean, all right, if let's just take away the football side of it for now and just look at that, it is remarkable. So, and the fact is that the talk of David Moyes leaving the football club, especially from West Ham's point of view, seemed to really die down. We hadn't really heard about it for a long time. If you remember, there was a period when it was like we're getting linked with Carrick and Will Steele and all these names being banned. I thought it sounds like things are happening. It's shaping up like there's going to be a change. It's all of a sudden it's gone very, very quiet. So it's very strange. All of a sudden, right before a final, we're hearing from the football club that David Sullivan's had enough. It's very strange, and when I say he's had enough, his stance has changed. He's basically saying, "Well, if you win the final, great. If you don't, then I want to change." But then the big question, Riley, there's two parts I want to mention. First of all, the Celtic link. Celtic manager looks like he's moving to Spurs. That looks like it's a done deal. So Spurs, the Celtic role surely is like the perfect role for David Moyes. Surely at this age of his career, go and work at a club that's going to be competing in Champions Leagues and things. Surely he would like that. So that's a big thing. And also, that's two things I want to ask you about that. And West Ham, all right, we're getting rid of David Moyes. They're going to move him on, say thank you, David Moyes, shake your hand at the end of the season, walk on. Who on earth are we bringing in then? Who's the manager? Is it going to be Brendan Rodgers? Because that's the one I imagine it will be. I've got no real thoughts on that. Or do you think West Ham are going to go a bit more modern and go with a Carrick? What's your feelings?
Well, I'll tackle the first part of your question, mate. Yeah, I think Celtic is a no-brainer for David Moyes. You know, they're basically guaranteed European football every single year. They're up against pretty much Rangers for the title. It's his home country. It's Scotland. I'm sure he'd have no inhibitions against walking back to Scotland. I'm not exactly sure what team he supports in Scotland. You know, unless he's a Rangers fan, I doubt he is. But I can imagine that being a sort of match made in heaven sort of retirement job for David Moyes. You know, the last two are. On the other side of things, a more difficult question. Who we're going to bring? I couldn't tell you. Graham Potter is still a name that floats about with me, and I think to myself, you know, can he do what he did at Brighton? But then I'm thinking to myself, how come no top club has come in for him yet? You know, why have Tottenham opted to go for a Celtic manager instead of a man who basically took Brighton, you know, halfway to sixth? You know, why did Chelsea sack him in the first place? You know, why did they not consider him for his long-term plans? And I just think to myself, you know, is there something I'm not seeing with Graham Potter? And then you also got Brendan Rodgers. For me, I just don't think that's an innovative appointment. It seems more like a stability appointment. I don't see him as someone who's going to, you know, someone like Potter, young, innovative, is going to come in and try and transform the whole club. You get someone like Rodgers come in and you just feel like he's going to come in, mess about with the team sheet a little bit, try and play his way of football by the odd player. I'm not sure if he's going to revolutionise the football club. We're in such a poignant time in our history at the moment that when it comes to the summer, we could be off the back of a European final and getting Europe next season, or we could be on a European hangover and, you know, we've just lost the final. But we're about to lose Declan Rice. You know, there's plenty of players who could leave in the summer if they're not convinced to stay. You know, Jarrod Bowen, Said Benrahma, Fornals. There's no reason why they wouldn't potentially leave if the right offer came in for them. So I think we're in such a poignant time in our history. Do we want to take a hit on a young, innovative manager who could take us to the next level? Or do we need stability and need someone like a Brendan Rodgers who is going to come into the club and
or David Moyes, or do we stick with what we've got? You know what I mean? Sometimes, you know, there is something about that, you know, that it's better the devil you know. Sometimes, you know, you don't want to always cut your nose off and go, oh, everything's better elsewhere. We've seen it before. We've done it with Pellegrini. The same thing happened. Exactly the same thing happened. We went, thanks, David Moyes. Thanks for keeping us up. You did a great job. We want to go with a really cool, you know, more of a Premier League winning great manager that's obviously going to take West Ham forward. It was a total disaster. He was an absolutely useless manager, awful, looked totally disinterested. His recruitment was terrible. And then we ended up having to get David Moyes back in to keep us back up. So I do have that kind of concern that we're jumping the gun here. I wouldn't actually mind Brendan Rodgers, but like you say, the only problem is with Brendan Rodgers, you do sort of think, well, if you're going to go with Brendan Rodgers, then surely you might as well keep David Moyes. You might as well give him another contract and stick with him for another couple of years while we're waiting around to find the correct manager to take us to the next level. If you're going to bring Brendan Rodgers, that's my gut feeling. But having said that, I wouldn't be too disappointed if West Ham said David Moyes is going to go Celtic, we're bringing in Brendan Rodgers. At least with Brendan Rodgers, you do get the feeling of it's probably in a safe pair of hands. I know he struggled at Leicester, but ultimately, if you look at his record, Leicester, he was actually really good. They struggled. Leicester didn't struggle because of Brendan Rodgers, in my opinion. They struggled because of their financial woes. They sold a lot of players off and haven't replaced them. I think that was a bit harsh to blame him. But yeah, it's an interesting one. But what's interesting, Riley, is that one is the timing of all this, right on the final. Don't really do without it. And two, it's credible. Do you know what I mean? This isn't just a back of the sun sort of saying some, oh yeah, Moyes could be off. This is coming from top journalists and all over. So it's interesting. Maybe it looks like wherever way we look at it, David Moyes pretty much has to win this game. They win the final to keep his job at West Ham. Yeah,
which is quite interesting considering like how much of an effect that will have on next season. You know, whether we have European football or not. You would have thought if we win the final, we've got more chance of getting a better manager for European football, as opposed to if we lose the final and then sack Moyes, and then we could probably attract a lesser caliber manager because we'll simply be playing for nothing. We'll be in a rebuild, the same way Chelsea are. So it'd be very interesting. I've literally got no sort of thought about that at the moment with the final on the horizon.
Yeah,
I can't imagine Moyes does either. You know, he's going to want to cement his legacy at West Ham. And realistically, I would say West Ham's a bigger club than Celtic with in terms of how much scope they've got to improve, what competitions there'll be. I mean, obviously they get Champions League football, but, you know, the Scottish Premier League is no Premier League. And I think David Moyes is one of them managers that just wants to stay at the absolute top of his level for as long as he can. So, yeah, it's an interesting one, but it'll probably be the story of the summer. But I just hope it's something we get done quickly. I hope it's not going to be one of those where, you know, we think he might be leaving and then he buys all these players in the summer and then 2 months later he gets sacked. I just think that's pointless. If you're going to keep him on, you've got to keep him on and trust him like you did last season.
Well, that's the other question, isn't it? You're dead right, mate. And the other, you know, before we wrap this up, is the other side of this is if David Moyes then is kept on, if he wins the trophy, they say the club go, no, we're going to stick with him. He deserves another contract, really, because he's in his last year. I don't want him going into his last year of a contract. I don't like the idea of it ticking down. And I think West Ham needs to act on that. I think that you've got to go one or the other. You either say to him, thanks, David, shake hands, we're going to move on. Or you say, actually, David, we want to keep you here for the foreseeable and offer him a new couple of year contract on top of what he's got. You know, that's what the club needs to do. They need to it's a big decision coming up. But it does seem to be right on the pony. But like you say, look, this is news that we're getting at the moment, and ultimately it's kind of irrelevant. I know we're talking about it now because it's a topic we need to talk about, but ultimately all that matters is this final. And like you say, I don't think there's any focus at all within West Ham at all with Moyes or the players about their futures. All they're thinking about is Wednesday night.